Direct from historic downtown Orange, California, it's time for the Bob Gurr Show. From undersea adventures to highways in the sky, he's done it all. And now, here's your host, the man, the myth, the Disney legend, Bob Gurr.
Hey kids, boy do I have the most interesting guests of the whole series here. I have Tony Anselmo. Tell you a little bit about Tony. After seeing a Mary Poppins movie at 4 years old, his career took one path. Most people have quite a few little stops and starts on their way. I swear, Tony's the one guy I've ever met that said, 4 years old, I'm looking at a Disney movie, and that's what I'm going to do for my life forever. And he did it, and he's still doing it. Okay, get that out of the way to see why Tony is so different than most people. Anyway, he actively studied Disney animation from a small child, literally, and he started doing his own drawings. It didn't take long by the time he got through junior high and high school. He went to the local colleges, and he started doing art classes at night. You see what this is? He never went anywhere except this one single path, all the way to Donald Duck. He attended night classes. He went to, here's what's really important. He started writing to the Disney studio and writing to all of the some of the 9 old men, writing as a young student, I want you to tell me how you do your work and how you can guide me to do my work, which I'm going to work with you someday. I mean, that is as solid a course as I've ever seen anybody try to do something. He was so persistent that by 1978, at only age 18, the Disney family was so impressed, they paid his way to CalArts. And at CalArts, he was in the character animation department. So you can see this path. I usually have to ask people a lot of questions. Well, we got through that year opener just really quick. Of course, he joined Disney as an animator in 1980 at age 20. So I'm going to sit back, and now that I know what got you started this whole time, I want you to tell me the story of your life in your own way, now that I've given everybody the general, completely rigid path.
Well, Bob, it's good to be on your show.
I hear you all the time. Between my hearing and your duck, we communicate, I think, just by looking.
Yeah, when Bob and I email, it's quackity quack, quack, quackity quack.
Yeah, that's right. He'll phone me up, and he'll talk to me in duck, because you have to exercise all the time. And I just tell you, what are you saying? But we always close it. With love you, quackity quack.
Love you, quackity quack.
Yeah, it's a very nice kind of relationship here.
So you pretty much got the beginning of the story there, but I think one thing I would elaborate on to give credit where credit is due is all those legends that you knew and I had the privilege of working with later would write back to me saying, you know, you need to take life drawing and improv, and I did it. Whatever they said, I did it, and I got my portfolio together, because this is the part that's not on the internet. My dad said, absolutely not. You are not going to go and get a job making baby cartoons. I will send you to Stanford, but you can't make a living doing that, and I won't have any part of it. So even at 15 or so, I thought, okay, well, I got to make a plan, because I'm not going to be a banker. So I got my portfolio together from these classes that I had taken, and friends of the family were going to go down to Disneyland, and I asked my parents, can I go with them to Disneyland? And they said, oh, sure, maybe you're going with them, have fun. But I left out the part where I was going to stop at the studio and drop off my portfolio. So I did that, and I went up to the 3rd floor of the animation building with, ironically, Don Duckwall. Did you know him? He was in charge of production at the time, and it was Frank and Ollie and Eric Larson, Jack Hanna, who was the director of the Donald Duck unit under Walt, a couple other people. They looked at my portfolio and they said, "This is great. We want you here, but we want you to go to CalArts first." And I said, "I would love to go to CalArts, but my dad refuses. He will not let me go to CalArts. He won't pay for it." And they said, "Well, step out in the lobby there for a little while." So I came out in the lobby and thought, this isn't going to happen. I don't see how. And Ron Miller walked past into the room, and I thought, oh, that was Ron Miller. I wonder what he wants. They must need to talk to them about something. I didn't know. And when he walked back out, he looked at me and he went, and kept going. And I thought, what was that all about? So Jack Hanna called me back in and he said, the Disney family is going to pay for a full scholarship for you to go to CalArts. It was the Disney Family Fellowship. So that is where my loyalty lies, and why I am so passionate about protecting that, because I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for them.
Yeah, but let me back up a minute.
Yep.
What was your father's reaction? Because he was now cut off from not having to pay.
Yeah, but he thought, oh, now you're going to waste your life. Okay, well, he said, go ahead, go do that. Don't come crying to me when it doesn't work out.
Okay, so he was it was sort of okay.
He hit the ceiling.
He hit the ceiling. Okay. Okay.
Because I had this letter on Disney letterhead, you know, that I was going to get a full scholarship.
Yeah.
So I don't care what you want, Dad. I'm going to CalArts.
Okay. Now, kids, this is a very important thing. What Tony just told me was, I am going to do what I'm going to do, and I have an offering here, and my parents are supposed to guide me. Well, I'm not going to pay any attention to them, and I'm going to do it my way. And that's a very important thing early on, to defy authority to do what you want to do. That's a lesson.
And I've been defying authority ever since.
Yeah. So it didn't take very long. As soon as you were into the character department at CalArts, now you could really get into the real subject matter that you really wanted to now understand and expand. Tell me about that.
Well, I mean, we could not have been more blessed and lucky to have the mentors and teachers we had there, because we had Ken O'Connor for layout. You knew Ken. He did all the layout from Snow White to Sleeping Beauty, and then went over to Imagineering with you guys. And we had Jack Hanna, who was the director of the Donald Duck unit, teaching us animation. Teehee, who you also knew, teaching us creativity and design. And we had Bill Moore from Chenard, who was a legendary design teacher, who taught us things that I think are being lost now. And the last was Elmer Plummer, who was a art director in feature animation. We had him for life drawing. And it was supposed to be a 4-year program, and every year we made a film, and the Disney brass and Frank and Ollie and those guys would, Eric Larson, of course, would come and look at the films. And at that point, a lot of the veterans were retiring or passing away, and they needed to restock, so to speak. So they'd look at our films and they'd take us early. So after 2 years, they said, come on. And I owe just about everything, not only to the Disney family, but to Jack Hanna. Did you know Jack?
Never met him, no.
Okay. We called it the Disney Show, and when they showed our films, and I was standing behind a pillar. I wasn't eavesdropping, it just happened to be Jack on the other side talking to the brass from Disney, saying, now I want you to take a good look at this guy, Tony, because he's loyal. And then I went to Disney that summer, or in the fall. We started September 1st. And I was in the class surrounded by, John Lasseter and Tim Burton, and in my class was Tony DeRosa and Mark Henn and Dave Prixma, Kathy Zielinski, all went to feature animation and became major animators. And I think it was because of the teachers we had that taught us what they had invented and passed that tribal knowledge down to us. And then we were brought to the studio, and we were not put on a production for a while. We were still in training on the lot. We were getting paid to have another 8 months of training with Eric Larson.
Yeah, let me back up just a minute. Most people assume, oh, if you're going to art school, you're taught how to draw art, draw artistic things. But you indicated that as a group of students, you'd create a film. Enough of a film. This is interesting because you're being taught not only your part of drawing something, let's say, but everybody, you work with everybody together, collaboration, as if it would be a real movie someday, but you're doing a little short version.
Right.
That's a little bit different way of teaching that you usually don't find, where you have a cooperative thing. We're going to practice doing what we're really going to do, but as students, rather than go out the door as a trained artist, and then you work in a place where now you're going to try to build a movie out of it. That's a very interesting difference.
And we had to not only learn life drawing and caricature and all of those classes, but in making the film, we had to learn how to shoot the film with the camera, how to edit the film, how to cut the soundtrack and the effects track and the picture track on our film. And we did each other's voices. So we were like you said, a little bit of a school production.
Because this, I see in different kinds of industries, if people are isolated and all gets collected by the corporation as their product, I can see this difference that you as a student with other students are immediately put to work in a production mode at the school, but as soon as you get to the job at Disney, no, we're not done with your training yet. You're going to have to get used to how we do it here so that you'll really know how. Is that about like that?
Absolutely. Eric Larson would take us into the sweat boxes, and I was in heaven. I'm in the original animation building where everything from Dumbo to the one we were working on later was made by all those talented, gifted Walt Disney's artists. And I'm sitting in the same sweat box they probably watched pencil tests from Bambi. And Eric Larson, who worked on all those films, is showing us Ichabod and Mr. Toad frame by frame. He'll say, see how this character will slow down so your attention is brought over to here? And then he will slow down and, pacing, timing, overlapping action, weight, all the principles of animation, Disney animation. And when we started, Jack even said, it takes 10 years to make a Disney animator. And I thought, oh, it can't take 10 years. I mean, I'm kind of doing it now. But it does. To learn all those tricks of the trade, to the illusion of life, to make something come alive from a blank piece of paper, it takes 10 years.
Well, that's what always spooked me in a way. It was like, you can direct an actor and actresses in a scene, with all the mechanics and the timing and everything. But how do you do that with an invented character on a piece of paper and put it into a movie? Because the movies still have to have the same kind of flow of the art and the dialogue in a scene with everything else to do with the scene to tell a thorough story that normally you'd pay live actors and actresses to do. So you're just telling me that this time frame now at Disney, you're beginning to see that, no, it's not a bunch of pictures you flip back and forth. There's a bunch of things that these figures are literally designed to be a part of all the other characters in each one of these scenes. So when you see it flash by on a screen for, a minute or two, it's a solid scene with a solid story, and it comes off of paper. That always fooled me, how that's done.
Well, and as you mentioned, story is probably the most important part.
Yeah.
On top of the animators, the background painters, the layout artists, and it was all done by hand.
Yeah.
So that art form is slowly being lost. They're doing a little bit of it now, which is exciting to me.
Yeah. I have this bus tour. A lot of people have been on this bus tour, but there's one stop. We stop where the Hyperion Studio used to be, and that's a point where I can talk about Walt training animators. If you're going to do animals, you'd better understand the animal enough that you
Right.
can understand what an animal is thinking.
Before you caricature it.
Right, and I thought that was an interesting point because the years to get up to doing something for Snow White meant that you just don't suddenly become an animator, or you don't suddenly have film and you run a bunch of things every 24 a second or so, and it automatically becomes a story. No, this stuff is all thought out all together. And that must have been that big jump, and you've got that knowledge that you could just dive right into it and work with everybody on it till your point you understand it.
Well, and they were so generous in passing that knowledge down to us, that tribal knowledge that they invented. And if you look at the Goddess of Spring, which is in the mid-30s, and Snow White was not that long later. How far they came, how fast they came.
Yes.
They were making this up as they went along, developing it, improving it, plussing it. And the same with, look at Flowers and Trees, that was 1932, and then look at the Nutcracker Suite, not that much later in 1940, how far they came.
Yeah.
And all those tricks of the trade, as I said, were passed down to us to understand every part of production, especially whatever part of that we were in. Of course, there's the story guys, and there's the layout folks, and the background painters, and the animators, which I was. But it was heaven. Bringing a scene to Eric Larson, he'd say, go do a test scene. I want you to do Goofy pushing a lawnmower. And, we'd have a couple weeks and we'd work on it in the room right next to him. You know that picture of Eric and Walt leaning against the wall on Sleeping Beauty?
Oh.
That's the wing we were in. Those two doors at the end of that picture, that's where we were training with Eric. He was still in the same room he was directing Sleeping Beauty. So we'd work on these scenes, bring it into Eric. It's hard. And he'd put it on his desk, and so patient and so generous. And he'd say, well, what if we tried this? And he'd just, lightly do this, and I'd think, oh, it's just amazing to see. And then you learn.
Yeah.
You learn from a mentorship, and I think that's lost.
Yeah. See, that's the other thing kind of puzzles me is that you're getting close to this full scene, and the animation makes great sense, but it's all done in little bits and pieces as you're working it. Under like what Eric is teaching about stuff, that's got to be in your mind. You see a piece of paper, you're drawing a piece of paper. In-betweener's doing something, and they're putting a little color on something, and then it goes into a machine and it's projected, and then over in the sound booth they got all the guys doing all the Foley stage stuff and everything. That's a whole mass of stuff that when you go into the sweatbox and you look at something that runs for 30 seconds or so, how it all goes together, and it's a believable, emotional few seconds of something. Can you describe how that little magic happens? Because it's simply running out of your hand onto a piece of paper initially, and then it's all put together, and oh, by the way, there's a voiceover for it.
Yeah. Well, where I mentioned it takes 10 years, it would take me 10 years to explain why Disney animation is so superior to the other studios around them. It comes down to the integrity of the character, how that character reacts to other characters, developing sympathy for the character so you care about it, and then wanting to follow it on whatever adventure or conflict it goes through. And then you have to draw that from a blank piece of paper, understanding, like you said, anatomy in the back of your head, but you're caricaturing that now, making it more simple and appealing. And whatever that character has to do, it has to have weight, it has to have design and interesting timing, not the same, not too fast, not too much. All those things you have to keep in mind while you're creating the illusion of life. And it really is, you know, they throw the word magic around today for everything. But that, when you look at Milt Kahl's pencil tests or Frank Thomas's pencil tests, there's nothing like that.
I'd love to, you say it'd take forever to explain it. I'd like to have you explain a little bit more, any details that come to mind, because I'm all ears now that we're into this meat of how this jumps off paper and jumps into something that's on a screen full of people watching. How does that work?
How is that done?
Yeah.
Oh, I should have brought an exposure sheet. So the voices are done, well, first it's the storyboards.
Mm-hmm.
Walt would approve that. And then that would go to one department. The layout department would start working on the backgrounds. Then the storyboard would go to the director, who would record the voices for the entire film.
Okay.
And they would put that together in a reel where the voice track is there, and the storyboards they're going along shooting those, not moving, right?
Right.
So you can get the feeling of the timing of the sequence, and if
Okay.
it's working, if you need to cut something out, if you need to make
Right,
something
okay.
longer, they'd mess with that. So I guess it'd be easier if we talked about Donald Duck.
Okay.
Okay, so say Donald's in a scene. Jack Hanna would say, all right, well, you got the duck. They all called it the duck. They didn't say Donald.
Okay. You were eventually assigned to the duck.
The duck.
Okay.
Yeah, I got to animate Donald in Prince and the Pauper and several things.
What year was that? The first one?
I
you
don't remember. In the 90s, I think.
Okay.
You'd have to look that up.
Okay, but wasn't there a continuity of the duck and its characterizations, its moves, and what it would be involved with quite a few years before?
Well, I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
of course, I would go back and study the original animation done by Paul Allen or
Yeah.
Bill Justice and so many people.
But yeah, this is something already exists, and all of a sudden you're going to plug in and absorb this and take
Because you
off in
don't-
your era.
Right. You don't want to change it.
No, but you have to absorb it in a almost seamless manner, which means, don't you have to think like an irascible duck?
Well, yes, it is acting with a pencil.
Yeah.
But you also have to draw it on model. You've heard that
Yeah.
term, right? So everybody gets a model sheet. This is one I brought that Clarence gave me of Donald Duck. You can see the construction lines in here.
Yeah.
So I would have this, or there are many, there are 40, 50, from this period, because this is where I think Donald evolved to his best construction.
Okay.
And I would have this on my desk, and I would make sure that I drew it just like that.
All
I
right.
wouldn't change it.
Yeah.
So before that, I would be in the booth with Jack Hanna, and he'd say, all right, well, Donald, he did everything with a metronome to get the timing of the scene, so that later the person who did the musical score could match that for the beats of the action of the character. So that's in Jack's mind. And then he goes, all right, in this scene, I want Donald to say, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy.
Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy.
And I'm acting that out in my head while I'm saying it, thinking about how I'm going to animate it later. That track goes to the track reading department, who takes the film and says, on this frame, it's the B. On 3 frames later, it's the O. 5 frames later, it's the Y. So you know where that is. That's on your desk.
Oh.
So on drawing number 37, it's going to be bye,
Yeah.
right?
Uh-huh.
That's the dialogue. You got to get the acting and the body movement first, and then you put that dialogue on there, and that's how you sync it up.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't think a lot of people are fully aware of the actual timing mechanics of how a set of frames at 24 frames a second are actually doing. But you're telling me, I can see if you got a story, you write a script, and then the voices all come together and do a story. This is almost like a radio show.
Yes.
You do a radio show, and then, the radio show is smoothed out. Well, all that part works good. And this is, okay, now we're going to bring in the actors and the actresses, but we're going to do it with a pencil, not a human being. Oh, this is quite interesting.
So you got two actors, really, the animator and the voice actor. In my case, with Donald, I got to do both, which people will say I was the only person to do the voice and animate a character, but it's actually not true. In Ferdinand the Bull, Ferdinand's mother and little Ferdinand were animated and voiced by Milt Kahl and Freddie Moore.
Okay. But luckily, in the years that you were there, luckily you were in a position to not only draw a duck, you could talk like a duck. And I'm gathering, because I've known you a long time, you could act like a duck anytime you wanted to.
It was typecasting.
Yeah. Is it possible that some animators, the character they work so long in their lives, they actually go to bed at night and, I know I'm the duck. I am the duck. You know, I know more about this duck than anybody else understands it. And it's still something that's very gossamer and diaphanous of pencil, paper, and voicing and a lot of technical detail.
It's craftsmanship.
Okay, craftsmanship.
And there's nothing, I'm much more impressed with craftsmanship than whatever the latest digital software is.
Yeah.
Because...
talk to me in a bit more detail. I know you've talked to me before as friends about characters. To really be a fully developed character, it has to be protected so that it never gets destroyed, it never gets distorted, or it turns out to not be due for new films in a cheaper, simpler manner. There's a lot of, can you talk more about why something is really, really, really good inherently, and it's got to be kept that way with everybody that's involved?
So Walt Disney was kind of the master of personality animation. The other studios were basically doing gags.
Yeah.
And you don't, Frank and Ollie used to say, just because these are the most beloved characters of the last 90 years doesn't mean you can't destroy them. And to register with a character, they would teach us that think of someone in your life that you love very much. A favorite teacher, your grandmother, favorite aunt, right? You know who they are. You love them for what they are. You know what they would do and what they would not do. If Aunt, Pat suddenly comes to Thanksgiving dinner and goes, dude, that was awesome, you're going to go, who are you and what have you done with Aunt Pat, right? Same thing with Mickey, Donald, and Goofy. There have been scripts lately that come through where they actually wrote, dude, that's awesome. And it's part of my job to not say that and to instead say, pal, that's swell, something that Donald would say. Then there's all the things that Donald can't say and what he, to be understood, to enunciate. That's a whole another 20-minute.
Yeah, it's just like some humans have a certain quality about them.
Right.
And even in different situations, that you can expect them to behave within certain limits that is part of their characterization.
And if you change that, it's not believable anymore.
Well, yeah, that seems to be one of the things about as time moves on and as dialogue changes and general manners in any 10-year period, people are always aware of how something's changing one thing to another, and then you always have topical expressions. Like at one time the word humongous never existed, but we forgot the corny words back in the 30s that we thought was fun that you wouldn't dare say today. I wouldn't say you're a spiffy-looking dresser today.
Would. But Mickey would, because that's who Mickey is.
Yes. And that has to be maintained no matter how much time tries to erode it.
here's the thing. You can put these characters, they say, well, how are we going to keep these characters relevant? It's easy. You put them in a relevant situation. You put Donald, who is who he is, trying to work with a telemarketer or a smartphone, or to, you know, his computer crashing, and he's going to react, and that's going to be a funny situation that is relevant.
Yeah.
You don't change his words or what he does or what he doesn't do, because then he's not Donald anymore.
Yeah, I can see there's advantages as a duck of the 30s moves into the 20th, 21st century. It becomes very puzzling, and it gets funnier.
Yeah. Yeah, nobody's ever complained about Donald's catchphrases, you know. If he says,
What's a big idea?
that's Donald. You just know in your heart that's him.
Yeah.
Nobody says that anymore, but he does.
Yeah, he does. I was always intrigued by trying to think which duck it was. There was a Ludwig van Drake, was that it? And he had a funny little accent, and he was quite irascible. And I've often thought my personality was closer to Van Drake.
Knowing
because,
you, that's true.
Yeah. This was, I could see that, yes, you have a duck, but you have ducks in the family who are their own persons in that family of duck. You know, Huey, Dewey, and Louie, and Donald, and then Daisy, obviously. But I thought Von Drake, as a boy, when I get upset, I turn into a Von Drake really, really quick.
That was Paul Frees who came up with that voice, who was also the voice in the Haunted Mansion, the narrator.
Oh.
Very talented voice master. And I got to work with him a couple of times in my early career, and it was just fascinating to me to see, you know, that he would, I guess in the same way that Donald comes out of me, that Von Drake would come out of him, because he didn't sound like Don Von Drake or look like Von Drake. But have you heard that? We were talking about recording earlier. He says, all right, the most important thing about any recording is the engineer. You ask him and he will tell you he's the most important thing to any recording. The singers mean nothing, the dancers, none of them mean nothing. And it's true, because if you don't have a good engineer, you're never going to get to Cleveland.
Ooh.
He would make that up.
Yes. Yeah, but when he'd do it a little bit of anger or disappointment, he'd really light up really strong.
And Corey Burton does that voice now, and brilliantly. Corey is an incredible talent.
Okay.
With just as many voices as Paul Frees, and he does all of Hans Conried's voices, and Dale and Chip and Dale, and very talented guy. My Von Drake was just an imitation.
Yeah.
So.
Some of the important points of developing animation and maintaining it correctly over the years, it must be kind of a strain for some people to see that as the companies move along and how they develop, let's say, cartoon animation, things branch off into television, it branches off into a little bit simpler type of things for different countries, different languages. How is different languages, when you have a character that's is known in English, how is that really done when it's done in quite a few other languages?
We have a department called Disney Character Voices that is a bunch of very hardworking people with a lot of integrity and love for this legacy that hold this together. Not only in making sure there's only one person doing every voice for that character integrity, but also what are we doing in Japan and Italy and France. So now all the characters have voices in those countries, because they didn't want us to mess up the language trying to do it phonetically. So there's a Mickey in France and a Mickey in Japan, and
yeah, I could see. Yeah, you got Mickey goes down to Puerto Rico. Oh, he's definitely going to talk a little bit different, even though he might try English.
But they do a good job of matching the voice. It's just in a different language.
Well, I see you've brought some of your friends. I see on the table down there. Can you
Well, this is
bring a couple of these up and we'll talk about them?
About the Ducksters. This is Clarence Nash's Duckster. His daughter Kay gave this to me, These are what Walt gave, after nobody ever retired in voices.
Okay.
The Screen Actors Guild allows you to, at 65, take a pension, but you keep working. So Clarence was the only voice of Donald Duck. He was the only one allowed to do Donald's voice when he was alive until he passed away and passed that on to me. We can talk about that. But this is his Duckster. And this is Jack Hanna's, who was my other mentor, who was, Clarence's director. And so these came from Walt. And this is...
What's the other little character there?
This is from the model shop. Jack gave me this. This is Donald's floaty in Beach Picnic. I actually used it a couple times later, but this is so an animator, they did this with all the characters, so an animator could see what does it look like from here, what does it look like from here, so you get the perspective right.
Yeah, in model form, yeah.
Right.
Okay.
And these are Donald's colors from ink and paint. So Disney had their own everything. Acme was Warner Brothers, MGM, all the other studios. Disney had its own paper, its own peg system, its own paint. And this is Disney paint. This is Donald's, jacket color and his beak and his feet here. Secret recipe that would stick to the cells and is still sticking to the cells.
These don't change over time. They just stay.
Well, now it's all digital, but
okay.
For that time, yeah, I think one person knew part of the recipe and the other person knew the other part of the recipe, and
you can't take it home and steal it.
Secret chemistry. Yeah.
Ooh.
Walt was exclusive with everything. Anything that you saw in a Disney film or in the parks, you didn't see anywhere else.
Tell me about this.
I just thought this would be fun because I don't think anybody knows what it is anymore. But this is, I'm gonna have to take it out. And this is before digital or streaming, or this is film. So this would be run on the projector. These perforations would be on a thing that would move it through, and the light would cut on and off, and an arc light would shine through this film onto the movie screen. So this is how movies were projected. This is what we shot on. This is what we used to edit at CalArts to make our films.
Yeah.
And this is what they don't use anymore. So that's film, kids.
Yeah, it's interesting today to talk about how much is actually shot in video and edited in video, but in some ways to try to be video by itself or stylistic and the way film used to behave going through a projector. This is all a bunch of very interesting technological change, but I'm intrigued by the look of that case, that lid, because look at this. Here's what it says: nitrate. When I was a little kid, I would get a hold of nitrate film and wad it up, put it in a water faucet on the side of a building with a match and light it up and make this big smoke screen. We got all kinds of trouble. Then they couldn't have this nitrate anymore. And then it says, please do not rewind after showing. Thank you, Walt Disney Productions. It's got old Scotch tape and a corroded metal can, good on the inside, but it's this thing you can tell. This has been exposed to atmosphere for a very, very long time. Film cans used to be everywhere, but I've never seen and touched one that at one time did contain, on stock number 7271, was nitrate, which is a bomb.
For the record, this is not nitrate. That's just the can. I just saved the can.
Yeah. So what else? What else you got down there in your bag of samples?
Well, part of my love for Disney, even before I got there, was collecting things, and I've collected an entire collection of Walt Disney's original release movie posters, from Snow White to The Happiest Millionaire in every format.
You even have a book.
Yes, the Disney poster book.
Yeah, Disney
and
poster collection.
It's all earmarked to go to the Smithsonian when I die already. But this is, I don't know, this is going to be... So this is one of the Donald Ducks. Maybe you could take the top of it.
Okay.
And I'll hold the bottom.
I'll do this here.
Oh, maybe that'll work.
Yeah, okay.
So these are one sheets that hung in the movie theaters at the time. I have all of these. And
Beautiful, heavy canvas, beautiful printing.
it's mounted on.
Oh, look at that. When you walk into the foyer of the theater, or where you buy the tickets and
Yeah,
everything, and
now
have all these
showing.
pictures.
Now showing.
Oh, look,
Yeah, well, I mean, they don't, not anymore, but
yeah.
the other fun one is, this is a beach style from Snow White, but when I started at the studio, I ran around because all these guys were still there. So I had it signed by everybody that was, I worked with all these people.
Look at all those names.
So Grim Natwick, Eric Larson, all the 9 Old Men, Joe Grant, the Teehee.
Look at that, kid. Snow White, an original movie poster. Look at that.
This is from the Mickey Mouse Club.
Mm-hmm.
That's where he says,
Donald Duck.
these are some backgrounds. There's Chip and Dale.
All right, yes.
This is from Donald's Double Trouble.
Yes.
So
Okay.
that, it's very elaborate backgrounds.
Yeah, very
And it
much
might be
so.
on the screen for 4
Yeah.
seconds. Oh, I got to show you this.
Okay.
This is the most valuable piece of my collection. Are you ready, Bob? This is very rare and very expensive. This is my pop figure of Bob Gurr, signed to me from him. How about
Look
that?
Is that amazing? Look at that. That was a
You know who you need to
tricky
interview?
pulled on me.
You know who you need to interview?
Who?
Bob Gurr.
Bob Gurr.
Yeah, you should do it just like The Parent Trap, with Haley Mills and Haley Mills.
Oh.
Yes, folks, it's Bob Gurr and Bob Gurr. You could do all of your questions over here, right?
Right.
And then you could change your outfit and sit here
Yeah,
and do
so-
all the
oh, yeah, we
answers.
could do- yeah, we
and
do
you're
all-
a genius, so you could figure out how to put that together and
Yeah.
interview
okay.
yourself.
Yeah, you hear that, Ernie? Ernie's my producer over here and the editor over there. Yeah, we could do a whole show. We don't need any more guests. Okay. Well, there goes the end of that. Well, I'll be darned. This is it's so interesting what you've got here. The industry is changing a lot. There's so many companies involved in various types of animation over the years. People want to hang on to hand-drawn animation as long as possible. I know the techniques are changing so rapidly. I do have to share, one time was at, up at, I'm forgetting the name of the place, the other company that does animation for Pixar, okay. You can tell how old I'm getting, I can't even remember where I went. They sent me down at a console, and it was in the process of doing Ratatouille. And I was, because I'm not an animator, I'm not an artist, but when you sat me down, there was a screen with a bunch of knobs and sliders and everything. And you had a face, a whole skull, in fact, that was drawn in triangles. In other words, every one of these had a XYZ assignment in Cartesian coordinates. And the fact that they could rubber stretch and do all kinds of things. And this was used just to get a rough idea of a facial move. And I started to play with that thing, and I thought, this is fantastic, because not being an animator, not knowing what everything's involved, I could twist a few knobs and run a couple of sliders, and just as fast as that, I could make this face do anything. And I just
And you didn't need any of the training that we had.
yeah, these are good tools to get a quick idea of what you're trying to do, and then it gets deeper and deeper and much more complicated before you actually get what would be a 1/24th frame or something like that. But it just blew my mind. Even this was like 2006 to see something like that. There's new apps all the time for improving the way things are done.
Does it?
Well, only if you use it for roughs, just to kind of get in the neighborhood of doing something. We use it for automotive, we use it for aircraft, all kinds of things, but you're not doing the final thing with it. you're having like a whole bunch of assistants in a whole bunch of computers doing something to answer a question that would have taken you 3 days to do. Oh, I can get it here in 10 seconds. Just treat it that way, because AI cannot think. Apple just did a recent study in which they asked it a question for, I think it was 6th graders, about counting something. And AI, 5 programs out of the group, couldn't come up with the answer because it didn't know how to think its way through anything. But it's good at doing what it was told to do. But that's a big difference than trying to say a machine was going to think. No, we know that. Now they don't think.
I'm sorry, Dave. I can't let you do that.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm not a fan. Like I said, I'm much more impressed with somebody that has to have that organically and in analog come out of their bare hands.
Well, Tony, this, we've known each other a very, very long time, and we usually know each other because we show up at some legendary something thing. But this is the very first time I've sat down and literally talked shop with you as to how does this work? And you are a guy that was right there this whole time, and especially the fact that I was so impressed that you watched Mary Poppins when you're 4 years old and literally said, I am going to do this.
Right.
And you did it, and you were consistent with it, and what you've learned in it, that the integrity of the doing it right is so, so important. And you're a guy that I know from previous conversations, you just fight for this thing's being absolutely right. I do it for other industries too, with my opinion. But this has been an absolutely great time to learn from you.
Well, I've learned a lot from you, Bob, and that's probably why we haven't talked about this before, because I'm too busy bombarding you with questions.
Yeah.
You know, what did Walt do here, and how did that work, and how did you come up with the People Mover? And
I get that
which is
all
what
the
I
time.
did with, you know, Frank and Ollie, and I wanted to know the history and how these things worked.
Well, one of these days I'll sit you down and I'll give you an example of how mechanical engineering was done at high speed under Walt Disney for the very first monorail in America. Because what I would describe to you is an industry practices that were literally invented for that one time, never did it again, and was the craziest way to do stuff in a high-speed manner by people who were not qualified to do any of it. So you want to hear that one someday?
Yes, I do. Over
you
marshmallows.
come over and sit in my backyard and you'll hear it. Yes.
Bob and I roast marshmallows over his fire pit overlook. He has a beautiful view of the valley.
Yeah, it's a quiet place out there.
And we roast marshmallows, and Bob tells me stories.
Well, you'll get the roasted marshmallows and the 59 monorail someday, blow by blow of everything, how that was done.
So I got to tell you, you know, that fact that the Disney family is the reason that I'm here. I wouldn't be here if it weren't for them. And all those men that were so generous to me, Clarence Nash to pass along the voice, Jack Hanna, the animation. And the Walt Disney Family Museum, I know you've been there, and I hope all you kids, if you're a Disney fan, that's a must-see.
Yeah, must-see.
But also that Joanna Miller, who is Ron Miller's daughter, Walt Disney's granddaughter, just bought Uncle Robert's house. And for those of you that don't know what Uncle Robert's house was, when Walt and Roy came to Hollywood in 1923, they stayed with their Uncle Robert on Kingswell. And she bought that house and restored it. So they're protecting that legacy through the museum and Uncle Robert's house, the way I try to protect Donald. And the knowledge that you have on the monorail and everything that you've done is valuable and precious history.
Yeah, it's literally, in a way, it's our duty to protect the part that we were involved in.
Yes.
And hang on to the importance of it so that other people will understand the integrity of, as Walt used to say, just do it right.
Yeah.
Okay, kids, this has been one of the most fantastic persons I have ever talked to, diving deep into the subtleties of animation and voiceover And a lot of little things to do with, has more than to do with art. This has to do with integrity over time, to never let Walt Disney's great ideas ever, ever, ever get lost. See you next time.
Goodbye, be good.